right now, bro.
Dude, I have 2 ARs and 2 pistols up here. So
Ready to go.
Oh yeah, dude.
yeah.
All right, guys, welcome back. We're here on episode 25 of the Speed Up and Get Your Hits podcast. And as always, my name is Billy with SpecTrain. I've got Nick from Velox Training Group and Brennan from Vortex Edge here on the podcast. If you happen to just be finding us, we're just three shooters and firearms instructors like to help other people get better, talk about shooting, and talk about how to get better at shooting for the most part. And that's kind of what we do here on the podcast. Fellas, what's up? How you doing? What you been up to?
What's going on? I've been working on some swinger stuff. I shot some matches.
Ooh.
And
yeah.
I shot 2 matches in the last week.
Mm-hmm.
And
I was there for one of them.
Did fairly decent, but the swingers have been like a complete thorn in my side. And it's not even like the partial swingers that have been a real pain in my ass. It's the open swingers. Because the partial swingers, like you guys would get this, like to me, the partial swingers are easier because it forces you to see smaller. Whereas the open swingers, like I will get like Charlie on either side of the alpha. And it's like, I am not trapping that thing appropriately. So I've been putting a bunch of time in the swingers. Like I own a swinger, so like there's no reason for me to suck at a swinger. So put a lot of time into shooting some swingers. Shot with our buddy Randall yesterday for a couple hours, and he was showing me some stuff. So I think I've got at least a plan to get better at swingers.
Very good.
I think I saw you doing designated target on a swinger, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Dude, that's the move, because then the swinger has a different timing every time you go back to it, and like talk about forcing yourself to see a spot on the target. Like you can't get away with anything else if you're gonna shoot points on that thing. That's cool.
Especially an open swinger, like if you think for a second that you're just gonna like look at a spot and rip, a 15 split at it and it's gonna be good, like no. It's probably gonna be an alpha delta. So like you have to see like so small on those things.
Yeah.
Like I really, really have to force myself to see as small as humanly possible and like try to see as much detail on that target as humanly possible. And then obviously trap it in the correct spot, which, it was going decently towards the end of yesterday, but I mean, you would kind of expect that towards the end of a range day. So
yeah, it's a very unique visual challenge, right? When you're talking about trapping a swinger, because you don't really have anything in the correct focal plane to look at until the target gets there. You have the dot, and you have whatever the background is, which might be close or it might be far away. And so as that target comes down, you've got to figure out the right way to shift your vision back to the right plane, see where the target is, but without following it, and that's pretty tough for sure. But a lot of fun to work on.
Yep.
Cool, man. Well, Brennan and I are just getting back from obviously the Nationals. USPSA Carry Optics Nationals was I guess it's fair to say it was a lot of fun.
I hate you guys. I hate you guys.
Yeah. It was also a bit of a thrashing in some respects, but I'm sure we'll get into that. Brennan, man,
most respects.
Yeah, let's start with you, brother. I mean, so this is only my second, but it's your first, obviously Nationals. What was the experience like, man? Was it what you expected? Was it different? What thoughts?
Yeah. So something I realized right away was like I do not have the major match experience that a lot of the guys who are at a similar like skill level or classification level as me have, which is very interesting.
Not even that, just like the C class dudes that have been shooting Nationals for like 20 years, right? Like,
well, yeah, there's that too.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I've shot 3. I think that was my 4th major that I've ever shot, and they've all been like state matches or like section matches. So I
Right.
haven't even shot an area match. I still haven't. I was going to shoot Area 5, and that didn't end up working out this year. But so I was just going into it like, okay, like first, like big match essentially. And like, holy shit. I want to say there were 50 some GMs and like 120 to 130 some M class guys, and then like it just went from there. Like it was a stacked field. Personally, like going into it, I didn't really know what to expect as far as how it was going to feel, like how match flow was going to feel, where I was going to place. I was really trying not to think about placement at all, just kind of trying to shoot my game, which I didn't do a great job at. But I think overall, like just high level impressions, uh, difficult match. Like the shooting was difficult. It took a pretty high degree of programming, I think, when it came to shooting the actual
Mm.
stages for me. Um, there's a fair number of stages that I looked at in the match book where I was like, this should be pretty straightforward. It's not going to be like best stage plan wins type thing. It's just going to be whoever shoots it, it shoots it the best is going to win, right? And I was like, that's cool. That's kind of my strengths. And when I showed up, like just walking the stage, was like, oh, no, it's actually really precise. You've got to stand exactly here. If you're 1 foot to the left, you're not going to see this target. Just kind of a lot of that was a little surprising to me for how open some of the stages looked. And so shooting that was difficult. A lot of far targets. A lot of very low hit factor stages, and maybe that's the norm for those matches. But I usually feel like at the majors I've shot, there's at least one or two stages that have a pretty high hit factor, and I felt like everything was even like the top guys were doing maybe like an 8 hit factor tops. So pretty interesting in that regard as well. That's not the type of stage that I'm used to shooting. So it was definitely a challenge in that aspect. So overall, I'd say challenging for sure, and I'm changing up a lot of how I train because of it. Like obviously, there's no skill development work going into the match. It's not the time to figure out how to do stuff like new. But coming out of that, it's like, okay, it's really cool because I actually feel like there's 3 or 4 things that like I have to develop the hard skills for, that the hard skills just aren't there to an adequate level. And if I would lock those down, it's just going to be that many more tools in my toolbox to be able to tackle a stage like that, or like the ones that gave me trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, it was an interesting match, right? I mean, I think the nationals experience and majors, in general, are always a unique thing. Something that I'm working on, specifically there. There's a couple things that are different about it. One is simply that there's way more stages, which
Yeah.
changes in some sense the approach you take to the match, because it becomes way more about, I think, just consistency, even more, risk avoidance than maybe you would at a smaller, shorter match. There's random things you run into that are weird, like shooting in the pouring rain with not waterproof targets and all that kind of stuff, and running through rivers while you're shooting and weird stuff like that, right? But the style from this match was even, I felt like massively different from the match last year. I was actually a pretty big fan of the stages and the way things were laid out last year. Obviously, at this new facility, it was a little bit challenging, I think, in Zone 1 because they didn't really have three-sided berms for pretty much the entirety of Zone 1. They had some bullet traps they could use to spread a couple targets on each stage out wide. But that's, I think, a super unusual thing to see at any USPSA match, let alone a major, let alone nationals, where you have essentially an entire zone of all essentially straight downrange shooting. So that really, I think, made a bunch of the stages feel very, very similar.
Hmm.
Right there.
Those
But
stages were
even
almost like
then,
indoor stages, almost like that's what it felt like.
exactly. Exactly. I mean, they were very much
Yeah.
like the stages you guys set up at Edge. I mean, you have to, right? I mean, everything's kind of down. You got a couple bullet traps out to the side just to spread things out, but most everything's got to be downrange, right?
Yeah.
And so it very much was, kind of that style. But then the interesting thing to me was just obviously a match like that is supposed to be a balanced test of skills. You hit on this already. But it was like, man, the exact same things for the most part are being tested on every single stage, right? So like every chance where you're moving laterally across the stage and you have a target to come in on, it's like, okay, well, every single one of those is going to be a partial. And it's always going to be like a 50% IPSC target, right? Where you have no chance of really shooting two alphas on the move on that target coming across the stage. And so it just eliminated, I think, a lot of the skills that, frankly, a lot of us spend the majority of the time working on, which was super interesting. And I definitely made massive strategy, I think, mistakes, especially in the first couple days. Just trying to force my style of shooting onto the match, trying to blend more positions and trying to shoot more on the move. And it wasn't what the match rewarded at all. It rewarded running to a spot, shooting two targets, and then running to this spot and shooting a target, and running over to this spot and shooting three targets. And so, yeah, I think that's something for me to start taking note of for sure, is figuring out, doing a better job of figuring out the correct strategy in some of those stages that are a little bit different. I don't know, honestly, I'm a little bit at a loss where to direct training for next year, because I would expect it's not going to be the same match next year at all, because it was a very rare match from what I've seen. But there's interesting takeaways. I mean, like one of the takeaways for me is like, man, I probably need to be like looking at some different ammo for next year. Like, I mean, the ammo that I load with just blue bullets and stuff is like perfectly fine for the shooting that I do. It's not perfectly fine for like 44-yard mini poppers. Trying to get first round impacts. Like, I mean, I'm shooting 3-inch groups at 30 yards or whatever, so you can't really guarantee first round impacts on those kind of targets at distance. So interesting things to look at and work on on my end for sure for next year. But I think Christian actually just posted his match footage today, so I'm very excited about diving into that and figuring some things out, because there was definitely some stages I was just at a loss looking at the scores, like, man, where are these guys finding the time on some of these stages? So I'm super interested to dive into that and figure some stuff out for sure. But
something I thought was pretty interesting too, like looking at my scores compared to everybody else's, obviously, like I was super far down the list, but as you go up, like as I would go up like through the whatever 100 shooters are ahead of me on any given stage, it would be like our times and our points are super similar. So even if you go up like 50 people, like we're not very far apart. Like if he and I were on the same squad and shot it together, like we both probably like fist bump. He'd be like, yeah, that was like a pretty good run, right?
Yep.
And but it's just because of how many shooters there were, and then how good the guys at the top are. That's where I started to see that like really start pulling away, like as far as like the super squad and how they were shooting. But it wasn't just that, oh, like you shot it 1.5 seconds slower than somebody else, and so you're going to be just like super far down. It's like, no, there's like actually like 3.5 seconds between me and the top run, but there's a bunch of guys in like increments of 0.2 seconds all the way down to where you are, which I thought was pretty interesting. Like it wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, there was
oh, you made one mistake.
It was very stacked. And in some cases, like you kind of mentioned, I think as well. I mean, Christian, I think, almost blew the curve out a little bit in terms of the overall match in this case. But I mean, still, I mean, 20% of within Christian's score for the match was 100 slots down.
Yeah.
100 plus. So yeah, I mean, there was a lot of dudes compressed into that top, kind of 20% space, and obviously that continues down. But yeah, it was interesting to see for sure.
Is there anything specific that that you feel like you're gonna hammer on, or just like a skill discrepancy that you saw that you feel like you're gonna hammer on in training for a bit, or did you feel like it's more general than that?
I hate to say it, but not really. Like I don't feel like there was a specific skill that I was missing that was really my my issue there. It was definitely strategy, but then some of the things also that again I wasn't necessarily prepared for at the match. I'm not even sure if it's worth spending time on because I don't know if we'll really ever see him again. Those,
Yeah.
I still am not certain necessarily like what the proper aiming scheme for some of those 50% IPSC targets was. In some of those cases, like where to aim on that target, right? Like that, I was really questioning that based upon am I moving, am I selling into position, and so forth. That's a target I've never ever seen before, and I don't know if I'll ever see it again. So it's like, am I going to spend like a lot of time working on that target over the next year? Like, I don't know. Like, unless we start seeing those, more, probably not, right? Because that's kind of a crazy target that doesn't necessarily have a reasonable training application that I can come up with. So yeah, I don't know. I definitely going to dive in. I'm definitely going to specifically really dive into the match footage now that we're starting to see some of the top guys. I haven't really thought about it as much since I haven't had match footage to look at, but I'm gonna go on a stage by stage basis and figure out where some of my time loss was and so forth, and I'll probably come up with some stuff based upon that. But yeah, nothing huge specifically I'm looking at yet. What about you?
I mean, so I think the big ones are stuff that I already knew I was really bad at, like just stage planning and sticking to plans and cementing that stuff. I did better on day two. So after day one, was talking to Randall and maybe it was Buck or something. We were up pretty late, and Randall
Yeah,
was
you
like,
were.
"Bro, you are not visualizing enough. Like you're not rehearsing it
Yeah.
enough." And I was like, I feel like I've got it pretty good. It's just that like when a mistake happens, it's throwing me off. He's like, you need to do it more. He was like, when you get on deck, he was like, you just need to keep rehearsing it, rehearsing it, rehearsing it, rehearsing it until they call your name to come up and shoot. And I was like, all right, like I'll do it. And day two, we shot the stages that I was the most comfortable with, just because I had walked the most times. They made the most sense to me, and like it was pretty helpful. So I think just like changing a little bit of how I prep for each stage is going to be a big thing, and that's where like I can actually use locals to practice, which can be hard. Like if you're ROing or trying to run the squad or help out or whatever, but like I'm trying to be disciplined at least by the time I'm on deck to quit doing anything else, even if it's just a local, and just sit back there and visualize. And
Yeah.
I think that's going to be really helpful. Um, the other thing I think for me is like there were not a lot of places where you could shoot on the move. But there were some places where I've already seen videos from the top guys, like they were shooting some stuff on the move, and like maybe not like a lot, not like Eric Graffel style where he's sprinting down and shooting, right? But they were moving on targets and picking up some time pretty significantly. So I was like, all right, so I'm only pretty much comfortable moving on like certain confirmation level targets. So I need to up my uh like my or change the way I view some of those targets and not let them be such big risks. And so like I've already put in a session of pretty much just shooting on the move, only partials, only from like beyond 10 yards. Um, and it's hard, right? But it's doable. Like you don't always have to
Mm-hmm.
just move through it super fast. Um, so I'm going to spend more time on that. Like I think that's really, really interesting. And you combine the ability to do that on maybe one, maybe two targets, and see what kind of positional gains you can make. Um, yeah, I think that's good. Um, it's hard stuff. Like it's not honestly, it's not fun to practice, but I think I need to put in the time. And then the last thing that's been specific for me is like short movements. I gotta move faster on them. Um, they're the easiest ones, like physically, and yeah, I don't get the same acceleration that I do on longer runs. So committing to that movement a little bit harder. Looking at an actual spot that I want to go, even though it is a short movement, and I could pretty much just kick out my leg, replace my feet, do a shuffle step and I'd be there, like not really good enough. I need to look where I'm going, let my eyes drive my body towards that, and then, do a nice 3-step entry or something like that, get the gun back up. So it's little stuff like that I was like, yeah, like I feel like I'm pretty decent at. It was not showing up for me at the match. So it's like, well, time to hammer that out.
I feel like you should talk about why shooting like partials, like far partials on the move is really hard. I think that would help people out. I have some thoughts on it because I've been doing a lot of that stuff here lately too. So,
I mean, other than the
It's
fact
hard.
that
It's
they're
hard because shooting them standing still is hard.
Yeah.
I see. I'm the opposite. Like I could hit it standing still, but like in my head while I'm shooting that on the move, it feels slower than what I'm used to, and so I feel like.
Yeah.
And I know this is like just feelings, but like in the back of my head, I'm like, dude, you need to like hurry up. Like you're shooting this really slow. But then I'll look at it on a video and it's like, oh, well, you set to 18 split at it. Like
Yeah.
it's a 18-yard partial or a 20-yard partial, whatever. Like
Yeah.
that probably wasn't the type of confirmation that thing needed. And so like for me, I think the toughest part of that is just like having the amount of like mental control that you need to shoot that thing instead of just shooting it at the pace that you want to shoot it.
It presents as a way harder target when you're actually like looking through the glass of your optic, right? It's like, oh shit. What I did, because I was struggling with that too, I was like, damn, this is like a really, really hard target. And it was like a no shoot partial at like 12 yards, right? So like that is a pretty difficult target, right? But I was like, there's no reason that I couldn't shoot 2 alpha on this if I was standing still. Like 10 out of 10 times I can shoot 2 alpha, right? And so I did that. Like I just stopped still and I shot it like 3 times, 3 different reps, 2 alpha, 2 alpha, 2 alpha. I was like, all right, like I know what I need to see in order to get that. When I'm moving, I just have to be patient enough to see that, right? And I'm going to get my hits. And like you were saying, like it's that feeling of like I've got to go, I've got to rush, my feet are going to outpace my trigger. What do I need to look at next? And we just start trying to get on to the next thing because we're moving. I think if you can slow down time for yourself like that and just go be patient and wait until you see what you need to, it takes a lot of the technical difficulty out of it, or not the technical difficulty, the mental difficulty out of it. Like now it's just a small target.
Yeah. One thing that I do
preconceived ideas of pace will kill you every time.
100%.
Yes.
I don't care if it's a classifier that you've been practicing all week and now you're going to go try to shoot it, or if it's shooting, or if if you have a preconceived idea of the pace you need to shoot, that's a killer. One of the things I love to say about shoot on the move is that shoot on the move buys you time to be more careful. And I do specific drills to like prove that to my students in classes, right? Where I just like try to force them to shoot some more carefully and slowly on the move than they typically would standing still, and they're still cutting massive chunks of time off of their score. And so you got to do the math on it. There's obviously a point at which shooting on the move does not make sense due to risk and due to how slowly and carefully you have to shoot, and the number of makeup shots you would have to shoot to actually make sure you're hitting the target and that kind of thing. And where that's going to happen is obviously based upon your skill level. But yeah, you really can, especially if your vision's on point, shoot with a pretty high degree of control and accuracy on the move, as long as you are patient enough to wait for the confirmation that you need on that target. It's probably going to take longer for that confirmation to occur, but once you get it, it works the exact same as if you were standing still.
Yep. One thing I do to play with that is like if I'm shooting a stage or whatever, like I'll always set up stages on my range. Like that's typically what I start with. But if I find myself having an issue with a specific target, whether it's shooting a partial on the move at 15 yards or something like that, like I will just put out like cones and then start at one cone and then shoot doubles until I get to the other cone at whatever confirmation level that thing requires, and like force myself to do that.
Yep. Love it.
So that might help some folks.
Cool. more to come, I'm sure, from that as we continue to work through takeaways and start looking towards other big matches and so forth. Man, for me, I've got to really focus and figure out. I know, the mental side of the game as far as major matches go. For sure. I tend to not shoot the way at nationals or bigger majors. I tend to not shoot the same way that I do at home, and that's not in a good way. And I look at the guys that I shoot with at home and the way that they perform, against me at majors versus the way they do at home, and it's not a good relationship there. So I've got to boil some of that stuff down and figure some of that stuff out for sure. But looking forward to digging into that in my own training over the next year and trying to figure some of that stuff out, and we'll hit it again next year.
Maybe Nick will come.
Maybe I'll get off the wait list for next year.
Maybe you will sign up at the appropriate time.
Dude, I was ready to hitchhike. If someone will give me a spot, I will be there.
So now is probably not the time to say that he probably could have gotten in if he just showed up.
Probably not. I'm not sure why you're saying that. Yeah, probably not. They were just kind of letting people in. A little bit. Yeah.
A little bit of that going on, but
son of a bitch. Dude, that's so aggravating, man. What kills me is I'm seeing not to bag on anyone, but it's D-class girl, I got in the nationals, and it's what the fuck?
Yeah, it's annoying.
Yeah. I was
I got
20 minutes late.
Oh, that's way too late, bro.
Yeah.
There were dudes spamming that register button on the dot, and they were getting waitlisted.
I think the waitlist started in 2 minutes. Is what I heard. I'm not sure if that's correct or not, but yeah. I mean, it was mostly full before open registration even opened. So,
which I don't understand. It's nationals. You know what I mean? It should be. I don't know. At least maybe make it longer so maybe more people can get in. I don't know. I don't know what.
There was 500 shooters, dude. There was a lot. 500 is a lot just for carry optics.
Well, how many shooters were there last year, Billy? Was it 400?
It was less. I forget exactly how many. Maybe 450 or something. I don't remember.
Because I feel like they even bumped it up. But if they had opened up another 100, it would have filled.
Yeah.
Easily, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But I feel like our squads were pretty big already. I mean, I think the only way they could really do that is adding more stages and making it another day or something. Yeah, I don't know.
That would be wild.
That would be. Not suggesting it. I'm just saying that's the only way they could probably fit more people. But anyway,
I'm just sour.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I hear you. Regardless of nationals, all we were really there to do was shoot build drills anyway. And it's fair to say that the Speed Up and Get Your Hits podcast crew showed up in that competition for sure. Congrats to Brennan coming in second at the build drill competition. Was super proud of you. That was really cool.
Billy ripped off a 123 in the qualifier and a 127 in the head-to-head. Yeah. At least we can shoot build drills.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, I'll probably just keep mostly shooting build drills. That'll be my training, I think, for nationals again next year, and we'll probably have the same results, but we'll see.
So next year, will people have to go head to head with you, or how does that work?
It's still unclear. I actually just had an interview with Shooting USA today, and we were talking about that. Obviously, there's now money involved in this, and so he's got to get like sponsors to like actually sign on and so forth. So, like the plans for all that kind of stuff are not totally locked in, but he's wanting to actually do it at more nationals than just Carry Optics as well. So I like literally maybe going to open nationals to shoot against all the open guys in a build reel. I don't know. We're gonna see.
Those
I feel
those
like
open
I feel
those open guys can't draw though, you know?
that's what I'm saying. I literally told him today. I'm like, I feel like I would have an unfair advantage. Like that's not even cheating fair. But anyway,
You'll be done by the time they get their first shot off, you know?
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Yeah, I was worried he was going to open it up to PCC as well, but he's not going to do that. So, but I don't know. We'll see. But we're gonna keep this thing's going to keep going one way or another for sure. But yeah, a lot of fun and lot of good shooters for sure. It's super interesting for me to see, again, where the skill differential, or I guess where guys emphasize different things, right? I mean, all the big boys obviously showed up to shoot. John roped them all in to come shoot. JJ, Max, Edens, Christian Seiler, right? All those guys. It turns out, contrary to popular belief, that apparently, a spicy draw and splits are not the thing you need to win nationals.
Can confirm.
Was my observation.
or even do well at nationals. I'll just put that out there.
Yeah. Well, they essentially didn't give us any opportunity. I was joking with Isaac about this to like draw to any targets for the most part, and there was no close open targets in the match either. So those skill sets were kind of eliminated, but. It's super interesting to see that kind of stuff. I think a lot of folks are shocked to think that, the guys that are the best shooters in the world might not do as well at something like a build drill. But it was actually a massive mindset shift for me coming into USPSA and realizing like, hey man, like a lot of the stuff that I've thought was like super, super important over the last, 10 years and I've been spending all my time working on is probably not as much of a difference maker as I thought it was. And started looking at a lot of other stuff other than just like drawing to 7-yard targets. But still, it was a lot of fun and I can't wait to do it again for sure.
That shit looks good as fuck on the gram, though.
It does.
You look good.
It does. It's gonna look a whole lot better in like Shooting USA slow-mo quality footage. I can't wait. It's gonna be awesome. But
I'll repost it.
Yeah, it's gonna be cool. Anyway. Enough about nationals. I think the main thing I thought we would talk about, completely separate, if at all possible, from any current drama in the shooting community. There's been a lot of interesting conversations lately about kind of training mindset, how classes should be run, and sort of just different ways to approach skill building in training. I've actually gotten a lot of questions about it lately, so I thought it would be something would be interesting for us to discuss. And I've obviously got a lot of thoughts, but I would love to hear from you guys as well. One of the first things I think that I've gotten a lot of questions about, and this is, I guess, possibly more specific to classes, right? But kind of the idea of process versus technique, right? So obviously, when I first got into this 10 years ago, every class I took for years and years and years is what I would consider a technique-based training, right? You go into the class, the instructor goes, hey guys, here is the correct way to grip the pistol, right? And then you go to another instructor and they're like, hey guys, here is the correct way to grip a pistol. And they're, of course, completely different. But that was the way, classes for the most part were taught back then. I feel like we've now kind of pendulum swung in some ways in the opposite direction towards kind of process-based training, where it's like, hey man, you just need to kind of experiment for yourself, and figure out how to get the gun to do what you want it to do, and how you get there is going to be kind of individual and unique based upon who you are and what you're doing. Thoughts? How do you guys kind of approach that? What are your thoughts on kind of process versus technique?
Yeah, I like the process way of training way better than technique. That said, I mean, technique is needed, right?
Yeah.
I think when you're looking at like process-based training, I think, like the easy one to talk about is grip, obviously, right? So like,
Mm-hmm.
what are the main principles of grip? And you could say like, hey, I want, like, one of the main principles of my grip is I need the gun to return back down to the same spot that it lifted from, the dot to return back down to the same spot that it lifted from. And so when you start looking at it like that, it's like, oh, well, technique just simply aids the principles that we're trying to get. I think starting to look at training like that is a lot smarter way than just practicing techniques. Because I think when you only practice techniques, it's like, yeah, you may get like pretty good, but I think at a certain point you're going to plateau, and you're not going to know why. And
Yep.
you'll make it to a specific point, like, yeah, you might get pretty good, but again, you're not going to know why. And like, I think it is the longer road too. Like because it's not the smart way, because you're not looking at specific principles, and you're not after, or you're not looking to like certain things in your training. You're just after like, oh man, my grip was good, or I just did the thing and I don't know why.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of principle based and process based training for sure.
Something I've noticed, and I could be wrong on this, but it's just something that I feel like I've noticed the trend a little bit. Like the higher level the shooter or the instructor, like the less they tend to get into like specific techniques on like a lot of the basic stuff, right? And so um like there's a lot of examples. For instance, though, I will just say like the class that Billy and I were at with Eric Raffel, like he pretty much didn't touch on any of a lot of like the fundamentals of what would be like a basic pistol class, or even an advanced pistol class. For a lot of instructors, like they're at least going to cover the draw briefly, the grip briefly, right? Like he didn't talk about any of that, other than like at one point he was like, you all need to get the gun out way faster. Didn't really tell us how to do it.
So start doing that.
Yeah, didn't care how we did it, but he was like 0.6 seconds, I need the dot to be on target, and then figure it out from there. Like, okay. And so like whole line is going through doing it different ways for everybody, right? But the point is that we were all trying to get to the same thing. And I almost feel like the smaller the name instructor, the more stuff that person feels like they have to come up with that is going to like immediately change someone's game. And I think that's one of the things that like potentially could be the goal of a lot of instructors, is like, you're going to come to my class and like you're going to leave a better shooter. And the thing that I'm hearing from a lot of people, and this is how I see it, is like, you're not going to be a better shooter right away. Like hopefully you're better for the knowledge that you've gained or some insight that you've gained. But like getting better is totally on you. And if you're not interested in that, and if you're just there to take the class, then like all you had was like a good day on the range, hopefully, right? But like if you're serious about getting better, then the work starts after class. And I know you guys feel the same way. 6 to 12 months of homework after a class, after nationals, like whatever it is, we're taking notes and hammering on that stuff. That's where I think is some of that technique stuff. It's like, I've got to give students techniques right now so that they can see a measurable difference, versus allowing them to come to some of that realization on their own. I think a better way for that, depending on the level of your class, is like you were saying, Nick. I think you were kind of alluding to it, but here's the goal of what we want a good grip to be. This is how I get to that. this is how I accomplish that and get the gun to behave this way. It's not like you might have it, be a different way, but the bulk of your like lecture was the ideal thing. And then there's, I might pick up something from you, and then I might pick up something from Billy, a little bit different with how you accomplish that. But ideally, I think we're trying to get to the same thing. And that way it's not, oh, there's like a Nick camp, there's a Brennan camp, there's a Billy camp, there's a this person camp. No, like we're all trying to get to the same thing, mix and match as you will, if that's helpful to accomplish the same goal. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. I agree, man. I think, in my mind, in so many of these things, where folks really get in trouble is by trying to get absolute with it. We can get in the trap of, carrying a hammer that's working really well for us right now, and everything starts looking like a nail. So I don't think it's for me. It's not either. It's not all one or the other, and it can't be. We all teach technique, even if we love process-based training. Like you come to any one of our classes, you're going to get specific techniques to work on, right? And that's an important ingredient. I think if as an instructor you're saying, "Hey, man, here's how the gun needs to be behaving. Here's drills to analyze how the gun's behaving and figure out if it's behaving the way you want or if there's discrepancies," and then you just leave it at, if it's not doing what you want, go figure out how to fix that, and don't actually, help the students with suggestions of things to try, then I feel like you are not doing your job. However, right, in some cases, I will suggest things for students to try to fix their problem that are exactly opposite. So to me, the issue with quote unquote technique based training is, it's not that we're saying you have to ignore technique, that technique's not important, that we shouldn't be teaching technique. But if you're saying, hey man, again, this is the way to do this, or this is the way to solve your problem, that's where you get in trouble. I've spent a lot of time now on the range with some high level shooters, and the kind of joke I always make, right? I'm sure you guys have heard me say this before, but if you get the top 10 shooters in the world in the room and ask them how to grip a pistol, the only thing they're going to agree on is that the 11th guy doesn't know what he's talking about, right? And that's a little bit of exaggeration, but it's also kind of true. They're all going to tell you something a little bit different. So if you think there's only one way to grip the pistol, or there is a best way to grip the pistol, I'm not sure that's true. I think there's a lot of variables there. Whether it's the fact that one guy on your line is shooting a 365 and one guy is shooting an open gun, whether it is differences in hand size and dexterity and strength and mass behind the gun, and all the different things that we're working with, right? There's the principles are obviously can be universal, but the way that we apply those to get an optimal outcome on the gun is going to be a little bit different from shooter to shooter, and it has to be. There's guys like as an example, you look at guys like Mike Seeklander and Ben Steger, right? Both recognize the principle that, hey man, isolating the your trigger finger, super important. How does Ben do that? Well, by saying you need to relax the firing hand as much as possible. How does Mike do that? By saying you need to grip harder with the firing hand, right? That's like really tough for a lot of people to get over. But the fact is, depending on how much dexterity you have in your hands and the strength that you have and so forth, like your path to trigger finger isolation might literally be exactly opposite of somebody else. And that's okay. Like, as long as you can figure that out. But I do think, it's our job to coach through that process and help folks find the techniques that work best for them. And that's where that process, we have to start with process, but then technique is also super, super important in the end, I think.
I agree with that 100%. And I think if you don't do any sort of technique, then you'll just leave people to their own devices, and they just come up with different things that may or may not make sense.
Yeah.
When I teacup grip the pistol, it behaves consistently, and it's like, no, we can't do that. So I think showing people technique is a really good thing. It just needs to be followed up with like, hey, these are the principles that we're looking for, and these techniques will help supplement.
And I think to your point, Brennan, as well, like the level you're kind of working at is important as well. Whether it's because In Eric's situation, everybody in our course was basically like masterclass and above, and therefore he didn't feel the need to like deconstruct the grip, right? For us, I think it goes the opposite way as well. If you've got a shooter as an
Yes,
example, who's working on entries, and his current level is he's running into a position, standing up, and then presenting the gun to the target. Like worrying about a three-step entry is not his fix at that point,
correct.
right? You start with the idea of, hey man, we got to get the gun up sooner, right? And then eventually, if you want to graduate to like super specific footwork stuff or whatever it is, maybe that'll be helpful farther down the line. So, I think depending on what you're talking about, either technique can be, too soon or too late, depending on the kind of level you're working at too. So.
Same thing with like really new shooters, right? Like you can't expect to teach a brand new shooter how to shoot a gun without being very, very technique heavy, right?
Yep.
Where it's like, yeah, you may understand the goal is to shoot fast and shoot accurate, right? But like first I've got to teach you like how to hold this pistol because the way you keep doing this is you keep hooking your like middle finger of your left hand through the trigger guard. Like that's just not going to work. Like we got to just stop doing that. Not a good technique, right? And like you've got to, you know, like you're just going to figure out a lot of that stuff at the beginning and it just is
Yeah.
what it is. But I think if as an instructor all your classes are just, hey, do it this way, this is how I do it, this is great, this is awesome, this will make you instantly better, not as helpful.
Cool. So then kind of the next version of this that I think has been discussed a whole lot lately, which I think is even more interesting, is kind of the idea of process versus outcome, right? So how do we approach our training, right? Should we be approaching it in a way that we're like, hey man, I'm just really concerned about doing this properly, doing it the right way, how I'm seeing it again, back to the idea of how is the gun behaving? What am I seeing through my sights or through my optic as the gun is firing or as I'm moving or as I'm doing the transition? Am I doing it correctly? Right? That would kind of be, a process-based approach versus the outcome-based approach where we're just simply looking at results. Maybe there's a part time we're trying to hit. Maybe there's a score we're trying to hit, whatever the case may be. And again, not to bear the lead, but I think we sometimes get in trouble getting absolute with this, thinking it's all one or the other, right? But I'll let you guys give your thoughts first. What do you think about kind of the process versus outcome-based approach, both either in a class setting or in your personal training? What have you found to be more valuable?
I think the process is definitely, it's going to help get you to the outcome that you're looking for. And I think that if you just go, hey, I'm just going to hammer on this outcome thing, I think that's when you'll see dudes like, take track the A zone, right? Say, oh, I want to get all alphas in 3 seconds. And then you
Yep.
run it 12 times and then you get 1 in 3 seconds. Like technically that's a win. And technically, yes, you do have to do it at least one time to meet your goal. But I think there's a lot smarter way of doing it and like breaking down like specific aspects of it, isolating things of it, of that specific drill, just as an example. And then going through the process to get there, I think is a little bit smarter way than just being so outcome focused. And I think you'll get there a lot sooner than just trying to hammer on a specific time. And again, that's just an example. I know I've had range days where I've done this and like, I'm sure you guys have too. And I get done and I'm like, man, I could have done that like a lot faster if I just trained a little bit smarter and focused on doing the thing that I was supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think everyone goes through that at some point.
For sure.
I think like it's been a super popular thing in the past, at least from what I've seen, be more in love with like the process of getting better than just like the goal of, making some, arbitrary goal, right? And I do think that is a good like overall philosophy to have, right? Because just in life in general, if you just set goals for yourself and that's the only thing that drives you, you'll eventually reach the goal, and then it doesn't last that long. Like the satisfaction from reaching that, and like for a lot of people who are driven, very goal driven, that it's just okay. Well, now I've got to set a new one, and then everything is just kind of, just a grind until we get there. And I think with shooting, like in my opinion, there's a lot of fun to be had along the way. And if you enjoy the process of getting better, then that's great. When it comes to like actual like training time on the range, I think you have to be concerned with outcomes in many ways, because like at the end of the day, we're training to be able to shoot matches or win a gunfight if it came to that, right? And so like I care very much about the outcome. Like I want to win the match and I want to be alive at the end of the gunfight and all that stuff. And so the outcome to me matters a lot. But with the outcome with training, and a training day is going to kind of illuminate areas of my process that are jacked up, right? And so like I look at shooting stages and going, okay, so my goal on this stage is to do essentially like this hit factor on it, or to have this many alphas and only allow these many Charlies. And that's very much thinking about the outcome. And it then drives my process for, okay, so, if I can only allow 2 Charlies on this whole stage, then where is that likely going to happen? And how does that affect how I'm going to engage all these other targets and what my dot has to look like on every other target? So I think you can use outcome. I don't even want to call it outcome-based training, but you can use an outcome and the desire to achieve a certain outcome to give yourself a valuable roadmap for how to get there. But then the work needs to be put in on like the process side of it. That's how I look at it. Like I really don't think you can just completely separate the two.
Agreed.
And I have to use that some level of balance like that in every single range session, or else I really don't. I'm kind of lost, right? If it's just about feeling good behind the gun, or having everything look good, like that's not going to get you very far in a match. You got to have something tangible to work for.
Yeah, exactly. I think outcome has to define process, and therefore the two are inextricably linked. For example, right? I mean, if I was just, I think this applies more to probably gun handling than anything else. But I mean, I think all of us started with a fairly traditional draw, right? And we all are doing something that's way closer to a scoop now than when we started. Why is that?
I feel attacked.
Because the initial process that we were using was not giving us the outcome that we wanted. Right? Was the process that we were using like technically meeting the principles we could have articulated? Sure. Was it pretty efficient? Sure. Was it giving us a good grip out of the holster? Sure. Were we actually following what I would have defined as a good process? Sure. But it wasn't giving me the outcome that I wanted. And therefore I had to change the process to give me the outcome that I wanted, right? And so right. I definitely think, that both, it requires both, 100%. And so to me, in class, in classes anyway, what I end up doing a lot is starting with process and then finishing with outcome in order to create goals and explore potential. So as an example, on a transition, right? If we're working transitions, starting with like a Blake drill, if you're trying to teach someone how to do transitions, is a really bad idea, right? Like giving them, hey, here's how this should sound, or here's like what the time standard should be, right? And we're just going to do like predictive shooting, like transitions, and you're just going to kind of throw the gun around, and we're going to do it enough times until you figure out where the targets are and build muscle memory to the point that you can kind of throw rounds towards the middle of the target and meet the time, right? Did we really learn anything from that? Probably not, right? So starting, I think, with a strictly process-based approach where all we're looking at is, man, how's the gun arriving on target? Is it landing where we want it to? Are my eyes beating the gun to the target? Am I seeing that dot come onto the target in such a way that I can actually predict when it's going to be crossing the A zone? Things like this. This is all I'm looking at maybe I'm using a timer as a start signal, but I'm literally not reading off times at all. We're just kind of looking at how is the gun behaving, are we shooting efficiently, and what are the hits, on target, right? But then when you switch to some kind of a drill that has a defined outcome, you find that people are lying to themselves a lot of times, right? They're over confirming on a transition way more than they need to be, right? And it's not because of the process. They're thinking process, but they're not actually following the process that they're articulating. They're doing something way different than that, and the timer kind of proves that, right? So I think it's super interesting to shift back and forth from the two modes of training. And that's really where I get, I think, the most benefit is switching back and forth, taking a look at when you have an outcome you're trying to achieve. Definitely, it's a way to analyze your skill sets, figure out where the holes in your game are and where you have room to improve, and then back up and look at your process and figure out, okay, what's the issue here? Am I not actually executing my process well, or do I need to change something in the way that I'm doing this in order to achieve the outcome that I want? And then sometimes you have to work on that for a while, and regardless of what the outcome of your current attempts are, sometimes you got to get a little bit worse before you can get better when you change things, right? And that's totally fine. But you have to back up and work on that just process for a while before you can revisit outcome. I think also your training context is important. So as an example, like can you use par times like that in dry fire for gun handling? Sure. Do I use par times in dry fire for anything that involves like transitions and recoil in dry fire? Honestly, no, not anymore, right? I think we probably all started doing that kind of thing at one point, but it's like, no, man, if I'm doing transitions in dry fire, like, you really can't time that. All I'm trying to do is get the gun to stop properly in the right spot that I'm looking and working on the visual precision and that kind of stuff. And so, where you're working, how you're working, what you're trying to get out of it, I think is important. But yeah, I think both are good. Both have their place.
I think the hardest part about this for people is defining what that process actually is and what it looks like for what they're trying to get out of that outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, not to plug our classes, but if you come to a class, hopefully you will learn the actual process and how to train and stuff, which is going to help the outcome that you're trying to achieve.
Even just that piece you mentioned, Nick, as elementary as it might sound, but like picking skills to work on, right? Seems to be such a challenge. I'm sure you guys get these DMs as well. I got another one this week that was like very very specific that just pops up in mind. It was like, hey man, I'm getting ready to do a drill. I'm getting ready to do a training day for our department. Here's the size of the range. Do you have any ideas of good drills for us to run?
Yeah.
No. Right? No. Not at all. Right? There's no secret sauce to any particular drill that's gonna like make you guys better shooters. Like, pick something you want to work on, like a skill set that you want to isolate, and then pick a drill or set up some targets in such a way that you can isolate that skill and go to work on it, man. That's all it is. That's all it is. But that's tough for a lot of people. I like to say that I think a realistic self-assessment is one of the most valuable tools a shooter can have. You don't want to think you're better than you are at something. You also don't want to think you're worse than you are at something. You want to know exactly where your strengths and weaknesses are, so that you can actually steer your training into what those weaknesses are and figure out how to improve on those. But it's something that a lot of folks struggle with, for sure.
I think this whole discussion is just another like huge plug for why you should use hit factor scoring and stuff too, right? Because like I think a lot of people, when they're training to accomplish some sort of goal, if the goal is a pass fail accuracy, pass fail time standard, like that limits you, right? And so you're either passing it or you're not, and you're passing or failing in one of two areas. And so what I've seen a lot of people, like literally I had a guy message me maybe a couple of weeks ago. I said something about skills over drills, right? And he messaged me. He was like, I totally disagree with this. He was like, I've gotten way better by working on specific drills and figuring out where I was lacking. Like I think he referenced a fast drill, and I was like, okay, like I get it, man. Like I was there too at one point, right? Where I was like, oh, I
Yeah.
shot a fast drill. Oh, it was like 7.5 seconds. Well, that's terrible. How are people doing it in like 3.5 seconds? And
Right.
yeah, like that's like a decent starting off point. But I think the idea would be you could save yourself a lot of time and heartache in getting away from those standards. Use those maybe as a test every once in a while. But the real test would be measuring some sort of like measuring both your speed and accuracy on a sliding scale, and that's what hit factor does. And that identifies exactly where your weaknesses are instead of just identifying you have to be this way in order to be successful at this drill. And so I think if as an instructor you have a lot of drills in your class that are structured that way, that's going to affect the way people think about how to train, just in that way, just from associating that drill with you. And so I think if you do have drills like that, you need to be careful that you communicate like what those drills are for or what they're trying to accomplish. Really, they're not drills; they're like tests, right? And that's why I think like having some sort of shooting standards or something similar where there's a sliding scale like hit factor or something like that. That's pretty much the way to go. When it comes to like putting everybody in the class through something.
Yeah. Yeah, I've talked about this before, and I think some folks have misunderstood in that, I have a real issue with standards that are just pass fail, right? Yes, if it's going to be a standard, it has to have a pass and it has to have a fail, or else it's not a standard, right? But if that's all it is, then that's not very helpful. I think some tests that give you a score, right, a final score that is a reflection of both speed and accuracy are way more helpful and allow you to track linear progression for you as a shooter. Great to have a standard, for folks to shoot towards, motivation for training, all that sort of thing. But you need to be able to track improvement and linear progression versus just saying, hey man, if you get one Charlie, you're out of this, and that's all the information you get, right? So yeah, I agree with that 100%, Brennan. That's good stuff. Cool, guys. Well, we covered a lot of random stuff tonight, but hopefully it was good for folks and helpful. Final thoughts on any of that, man? Training related or otherwise before we sign off?
Go shoot a match.
Good.
Yeah. Hopefully the next Nationals podcast that we do, I will get to participate in that. So.
Absolutely, we're gonna lock down all top 3 spots next year, bro, at the Bill Drill competition. Let's go. What was third place, Brennan? Do you remember the time?
161.
I feel like Nick's got that. Yeah, no problem.
Dude,
in the back.
I've got 140s all day long.
There you go. Top 3, baby. Here we come. Everyone else be on notice. I don't know. Isaac might be able to participate next year, so maybe we'll have 3 of the top 4. We'll see.
Can we get like a speed up and get your hits T-shirt or something, like, and put that on the camera? I mean, come on, that'd be cool.
It needs to be a cutoff, dude. It needs to be cut off sleeve.
Oh, no.
Cut off with a hood.
No.
Dude, sign me up. I will wear it.
No. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I think that's definitely worth thinking about for sure. We'll have to make that happen. All right, guys. Good stuff. Thanks for being here. Guys, thanks for listening. If you still made it here, check us out. All our information's down in the information below. If you haven't followed these guys on the socials, definitely do that. Or train with any of us if you get a chance. Promise you won't regret it. And other than that, until next time, this has been Speed Up and Get Your Hits. We'll see you on the next episode. Thanks, guys.